What's up, everybody? I'm very, very happy to say I'm delighted to be joined by Dave as a party from Talking Wolves. It has been a little minute since we spoke, sir. How are you?
I'm very well, mate. How are you?
I'm jealous of that shirt. I'm not lying. I was saying to you beforehand, it's quite tasty, isn't it?
It's nice. It's only a training shirt, but Wolves always seem to have better training shirts than home and away shirts, so I do like this one. Bit different.
Yeah, it is. It's shaking it up. I mean, what your shirt there looks like is what I think Nike wanted Barca's home shirt to look like, but it
Yeah.
just did not turn out that way.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I like it though. Nice.
Again, nice to see a bit of Scouse influence there as well. With I think the brand is there, or
Castile,
a pair of Scouse brothers.
yeah, correct. Yeah, I mean they're making a bit of a push in the football scene. I think, like we said earlier, Rangers. I think Newcastle and Wolves this season. I think they're pushing abroad as well. So yeah, growing brand at the moment. Hopefully it goes well for them.
Anyway, I really appreciate your time, but I wanted to just catch up with you. It's been a while since we spoke, and there's been a couple of links to a couple of your guys again. And you must be sick of the sight of me at this point when it comes to talking about this, Dave. But Pedro Neto and Adama Traore, and I also want to check in on how Kiana Hoover is doing with you guys. But let's start out with Pedro Neto. So he's injured at this moment in time. So even for you guys, for the start of the season, is probably a little bit far-reaching to think he'll be back fit and available. So where is he at this time? And have you heard anything about Liverpool links?
Well, yeah, he got injured towards the end of last season, which was a little bit of a worry because Wolves were on this weird sort of downhill spiral at that time, and he was the only person trying to sort of pull us out of that mess. And I think we just about got ourselves to a point where we knew we were sort of safe, we could say. And then he had an injury, which I think Wolves were trying to play him through that pain threshold because he had his knee strapped up all the while. And I think in the end, his knee just, I can't remember the exact injury off the top of my head, but basically kneecap had just gone. So he's been injured. I know he's back sort of in rehab. He's back at the training ground doing sort of very, very light training. But as far as we're aware, it's probably going to be sort of October, November, I think at the very latest for when he's going to return. So I know I saw the link. There's been Liverpool and Neto links previously, I'm fairly certain, but this one came from 90 min, I think. And the guy got very, very defensive when people were sort of questioning him about it, I think. But this summer, I think it's very, very unlikely that he's going to be leaving Wolves. January, maybe. But this summer, definitely, I think it's a non-starter.
Yeah, it will be almost impossible to see how he could pass a medical first and
Exactly,
foremost in
yeah.
the condition he's in. And I won't lie, somebody that I've always kept an eye on and thought I could see him at Liverpool. I could see him fitting into our system. And again, Pep Lijnders, our coach, has a great background in Portuguese football with Porto and stuff. And I'm sure he will have various contacts on Neto. But I agree with you, Dave. I think he's somebody I'd like at Liverpool. But I do think maybe next year or January is probably more likely. From what I'm reading, and tell me if I'm wrong here, it seems that you guys seem to be open to moving on a couple of players to maybe help fund a rebuild or something. And the names that I keep seeing mentioned, not linked to Liverpool, but just available, is Ruben Neves, and one who is linked to Liverpool, and that's Adama Traore. Now, my reading of Adama's situation is that he's got a bit of a dicky right shoulder, and it's dislocated numerous times over the past couple of seasons. Am I right in that one?
Yeah. It was even when we signed him, he had a shoulder problem at Middlesbrough. And I don't know, I think they were hoping that maybe they'd do surgery on it this summer, and he was at the Euros with Spain. So I don't know what's going on with that. He's played through it quite a lot, and there's times where if it gets dislocated, I don't know how good it is for him. It gets put back into place. But he has had issues with that previously. But you're right about the Wolves open to offers thing. It's very, very strange. Obviously, a lot of these players were signed under Nuno. He's gone now. So yeah, I can understand it if some of them do want to look elsewhere and maybe move on for a new challenge. Patricio, our goalkeeper, did exactly that. But the Neves one started very, very early. But they were saying that Wolves would be open for offers of about £35 million, which I think is still seems quite low in this. I know people are saying, the market with COVID and so on, but there's still some ridiculous fees being thrown around. So I still think that's low in this market. But I don't know if that's Wolves just sussing out the market, seeing what money they could get for Neves. But the Adama one's been around for ages. Like you said, I think Liverpool have always been linked with him. Last season when he did, not season just gone, the season before when he did quite well, did all right against Liverpool both times, or 3 times I think we played you in the FA Cup that year. He did quite well. But Wolves wanted ridiculous amounts, only about £80 million. And then last season he was fairly poor and that fee's gone down. And I think Liverpool are linked with about £25 million, £30 million max. But apparently Wolves still want £40-50 million, which I don't think they'd get. And it's said that Adama's refusing to sign a new contract, although he's got about 2 years left on it. So it's going to be an interesting one. I think now Wolves have been abroad the last week or so. Now they're going to be back in England by the end of this week. It'll be interesting to see if rumours in Adama and in Neves obviously ramp up a little bit more. It's definitely feasible, but it's just what Wolves value him at, and how much Liverpool are prepared to pay.
What always got me about Adama is, and Klopp said himself on his day, he's unplayable. But how often are those days will be the big question for me, because when I watch Adama playing, granted I wouldn't see him play anywhere near as much as you would, but there's some good points and there's definitely some stuff that still needs to be addressed. I don't think he has the finished product yet, whether that be the final ball or enough goal scoring. But I suppose then again, that's something that can be coached. I just would love to get your take on his progression as a player.
Yeah, I think he's definitely improved since he came to Wolves. He was very, very... that first season we signed him, he had a lot of stick. We signed him for about £18 million, and remember he scored on his debut, and then just... He had, like you say, he had spells where it was like, wow, he's really, really good. And then other games where you're playing with 10 men because he's absolutely useless. The second season was fantastic. Him and Jimenez, had this sort of telepathic connection, and he was assisting goals for fun and getting a lot of service off Jimenez and adding goals to his game as well. But then last season he struggled to break into the team. He was played out of position earlier in the season, played like as a right wing back, and then Jimenez obviously had a major injury, so he just looked out of sorts throughout most of the season. And that's, like I said earlier, his value just plummeted. And it will be interesting. Chelsea have been linked with him quite strongly, but apparently they want to play him as a wing back, which could work. But I just think, whichever way you look at it, I think the one thing, you look at his strengths, it's obviously pace and power, acceleration. But the rest of his game, if I said to you now, Craig, it's going to be 40 million for Adama, like you say, you've seen a bit of him, but not a lot. And the first thing you're going to do is look at his numbers for last season. And in the Premier League, 1 goal and 0 assists. It isn't enough, really, is it? Especially if you're going to be paying 30 to 40 million pounds on him. So I think that whichever way you look at it, I think him as a player and a club, if they were to buy him, he would need to convince a lot of people if he were to move clubs this summer.
Yeah, it's one of those for me. I think Adama Traore might be a player that will be linked to Liverpool until he moves somewhere else. It's one of those every summer with every club, isn't there? One thing I did want to touch on was Raul Jimenez and how brilliant it is for the wider football community, as well as, of course, yourselves, to just see him back doing bits of football and doing little bits and starting his road to recovery. And I think the whole league missed him, mate. It's mad, isn't it? We all have a lot of time for Wolves and of course, Raul Jimenez.
Yeah, I mean, he came into the Premier League a few years ago, scored a good amount of goals, and then the season before last was fantastic. Even last season, I think he'd got 4 in 10, which for a striker was not a bad return before he got injured. So I think the whole season could have been so different if we had him. And like you say, fantastic. They didn't want to rush him back at the end of last season. I think if we were desperate, we could have, but there's no point in risking that when there wasn't anything for us to play for. But he's been back in pre-season, scored in a behind closed doors friendly yesterday, which is great to see. And fingers crossed it's the Raul Jimenez of old and we see him banging in the goals again this season.
Yeah, he was a joy to watch. He really was. I won't lie. I had a lot of time watching Raul Jimenez play. There's a lot to like about the guy.
Yeah.
I wanted to check up on one of our old boys as well. I say old boys, he's still relatively young. Keanu Hoever. Obviously, we had that deal where Diogo Jota came to our club. Thank you very much for him, by the way. We love him dearly. And Keanu Hoever went not as part of the deal, but at the same time in the opposite direction. Yeah. How's life at Wolves treating him?
It's been an interesting one. I think last season he only had like a handful of games, really, very little starts under Nuno. And I remember I spoke to a couple of Liverpool fans as well about him, and always thought that maybe he would suit, especially if we played like a back five, maybe a centre back role more than like an attacking right wing back role. But wing back seems to be where Nuno played him a lot, and he's played a lot in pre-season under Bruno Lage as a right back as well. So I'm hoping, he's been sort of second fiddle to Nelson Semedo this season just gone. I'm hoping we see him get some more game time, which I think we will. He scored a great goal at pre-season on Monday, fantastic volley from the edge of the box in that game. But like you say, he's still a young lad, still got a long way to go. I think then he's sort of 2021, and I think in this system, quite a high press system, I think there's going to be lots of changes, and I think he'll get much more opportunities this season, hopefully in the Premier League.
I know when he was at Liverpool, there was very high hopes for him, and you talked about him as a right back, and he was also seen as a potential centre back as well from our side. And there was a lot of happiness, obviously, when we signed Jota, but there was a lot of people who didn't want to lose Hoever because we fought really hard to get him. So it's great to see that he's starting to progress. And one thing I thought of when I heard that Nuno had moved on to Spurs was that Doherty must be absolutely over the moon now to get rid of Mourinho and to have him back in, because he probably got to get much more game time on the pitch going forward now.
Yeah, we've been linked. Well, there's been every so often there's been a link with Doherty, or someone brings him back up again and saying, "Would you have him back at Wolves?" And then part of you thinks yes, because like his goal contributions were massive compared to Semedo, who struggled a little bit at times last season. But then part of you thinks like, nah. But it'll be interesting to see how he gets on with Nuno. There's rumours again. I've seen that he may leave Spurs. But like you said, I think him and Nuno got on so well together. I think it could be a big season for him as well.
Absolutely. And what are you expecting from the season ahead from your side? Any more transfer business that you hope gets over the line before August 31st?
It's been really, really quiet for us recently, which is strange. We made a pretty decent signing Trincao from Barcelona on loan with an option to buy. Who's like quite a decent winger. But Wolves fans are desperate for a new centre-back. Possibly a new central midfielder, but it's so quiet at the moment. There's only 2-3 weeks left of the before the season kicks off anyway, so that's what Wolves fans are hoping for. As it stands with the squad at the moment, I think we do quite well to break into the top half, if I'm honest. But another couple of signings and who knows. But this pre-season, as always, it's been all right. It's been, games that we've won against decent teams like Real Betis, who finished 6th in the Spanish league last season, beat them 1-0. But then we've lost to other teams like Crew Alexandra, for argument's sake, and Las Palmas. And then that's when the fans all of a sudden start getting on the manager's back after just 3 games in charge of the club. So, yeah, it's crazy being a football fan at the moment. But, yeah, fingers crossed it's another successful season.
I never worry about pre-season results. No. I just pray everybody gets through without any injuries, and come the start of the season, we're all back. And how is the feeling about your new manager? Because obviously Nuno did such great stuff there. The Portuguese connection at Wolves, very, very strong. How do you feel about Nuno moving on and the new manager in the door?
Yeah, it was a bit of a shock about Nuno, if I'm honest. Like quite a big shock at the time, and even people that were wanting him out were shocked that it actually happened. So this guy, Bruno Lage, wasn't the top of my list to replace him, if I'm honest. But for looking into him more, looking at his experience when he was at Benfica, played really attacking football and did well. And from the pre-season games, he seems to be really attacking. So it's gone from one extreme of Nuno really being quite defensive last season to another where Bruno Lage is quite attacking, and we leaked goals from it in pre-season. There was the last game we had, there was a couple of goals we conceded, which we just got done by having a high line. But if you're playing 2 or 3 games in a brand new system that you're not used to, that's going to happen. So I think as long as we can get rid of the teething issues as early as possible, it could be a good season. And I think seeing attacking football at Molineux is going to be really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, whatever about Nuno being a very good manager, and he was certainly on the cagier side of managers. Yeah, I think that's fair to say. It was a 1-0 win is absolutely fine.
He's a bit like Mourinho. He's like a carbon copy of Mourinho almost, and that's why I'm quite surprised he's gone to Spurs. So unless he's got to get off to a good start at Spurs, I think otherwise it could turn sour quite quickly there if he sort of does the same sort of system and tactics that Mourinho adopted there.
Oh, he's a far nicer fella than Mourinho, though. I think the football world probably has a lot more time for Nuno. Dave, look, it's been a pleasure. I hope to catch up with you again, mate, during the 100%. Season, if that's all right. And I'm going to be keeping an eye on your boys. I'm not going to lie, because I do like the idea of Pedro Neto at Liverpool someday, as much as I'm sure you guys don't want to lose them. So, again, Dave, it's a pleasure. All your links to your socials will be in the description of the video. Where can guys find you on Twitter? Because I know you're quite active on there.
Yeah. So, I mean, Talking Wolves, at Talking Wolves, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and my own, Dave Azopardi.
Dave has a party. Always a pleasure, sir. And again,
you.
very envious of the shirt. It's quite nice. And again, the lovely sign in the background. But most importantly, mate, it's been great catching up with you. It's been far too long.
100%
Talk to you